Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Crucible's virtual artist talk with Lara Hopwood. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alyssa Stone. I am the Director of Programs at Crucible in Oakland, California, and we are so glad that you are joining us for our fifth virtual artist talk with the Crucible. Go ahead and jump on over to the chat box on your Zooms and give us a quick hello. Tell us where you're joining us from today. We love to see where everyone is watching our virtual artist talks from. So grab the chat function and say hello to us. We're so glad that you're joining us. Hopefully some of you are familiar with the Crucible at this point, and if not, I'll tell you a little bit about the Crucible. Since 1999, the Crucible has been an important cultural arts organization and community in the Bay Area. We serve more than 5,000 students a year, work with over 45 local schools offering classes, workshops, and site visits, and have the pleasure of introducing so many students to the transformative power and confidence building experience of making art. Over 20,000 people each year interact with our classes and programs, with 64% of the young people we serve receiving financial aid to participate. For many, the Crucible is the industrial arts school in the Bay Area, known for high-quality teaching and a vibrant artist community. However, since COVID-19 erupted in our area, the Crucible has had to cancel or postpone more than 230 classes and programs. We are working to bring some of the magic of the Crucible online, including this talk today. We are going to get through this, and we are asking our community to support us by becoming a member, purchasing a gift certificate, donating directly, or buying art directly from our faculty. Today is the last day of our big matching campaign at the Crucible. We have been so lucky to have an anonymous donor match all donations up to $50,000, and our campaign ends today. So definitely check out thecrucible.org and donate what you can, or help share the magic of the Crucible on social media or with your friends so that we can help navigate these choppy waters. We encourage you throughout the talk to send questions you have for Lara Hopwood to us privately or in the chat function on the bottom of your screen. There will be time at the end of our talk today where I will read your questions out loud. So go ahead and add your questions to the chat, and I'll read them at the end of our discussion today. We have an extra special treat towards the end of our talk. Lara is going to actually demo some fire performance for us all today, which we are so excited about. So I know you'll have lots and lots of questions to ask. Today, we are talking, of course, with Lara Hopwood, one of our faculty in our Fire and Performance department. Hopwood began her performance career when she took her first class at the Crucible in January of 2008. She'd previously been trained in color guard, making her transition to fire performance a natural next step. Since then, she's become an integral part of the Fire and Performance faculty, serving as department head from 2009 through 2018, teaching dozens of sessions of our Art of Fire Dancing 1, or POI, over the years, and regularly performing and demonstrating at Crucible Open Houses and other public events. Outside the Crucible, Hopwood has experience performing in independent productions and private parties. She has been a fire performer in numerous Burning Man fire conclaves and was featured in Intrinsic Self, an award-winning documentary about fire performance art created for the 7-day film festival. Hopwood also performed with fellow Crucible faculty and community members at the Oakland Museum's Burning Man block party last fall as part of their No Spectators, The Art of Burning Man exhibit. And if you caught that performance, you know it was incredibly special. And we are so grateful that Lara is joining us today. Please join me in a warm virtual welcome to Lara Hopwood. Lara, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
We are so excited to get to talk to you and learn about your background. So we're going to start at the beginning, always a very good place to start. Could you tell us how you first discovered fire performance?
Sure. I was actually kind of at a point in my life where I felt like I was a little bit in a rut, where I was doing the same things day in and day out. And I was looking for something creative to add to my life, and I was kind of asking around and seeing what might be out there. And a friend said, "Hey, have you ever thought of making have you ever thought of making large fire sculptures or something? And I thought, I have no idea where to do that. And I came home and asked my husband, do you know where I could learn like metal working? And he said, I saw a big billboard for this thing called the Crucible. I don't know much about it. And so I checked it out on the website, and there was this category of classes called fire performance. And I explored around and thought, and I signed up for fire eating and fire poi. And that was kind of how it all started.
Is there a moment that sticks out in your mind when you realized this was a passion you wanted to pursue? What got you hooked?
I think what it was it was really even the classes that I took at the Crucible, in that the first poi class I took, there's something about it where, excuse me, you get, you learn incrementally. And so I was learning and being successful in each class. So it made me want to continue to be more successful in each class. And I think by the end, when we got to light up with fire, that was an amazing experience. And I would say that was when I was hooked.
The equipment used in fire and performance is extremely important. The equipment almost becomes an extension of you. Tell us about your preferred fire performance equipment and what it was like building those skills.
I used a number of props, fire performance props, but my favorite ones, the ones that I like and feel the most connected with, are fire poi and fire eating. And I think a lot of what was the second part of the question?
What your preferred equipment is and what it feels like to use that equipment.
Oh, what it feels like. It feels wonderful in that I've come to a point where I can do a lot of things so that whatever I imagine or feel like expressing, I can express. And so it's not a struggle so much, although there's always something new to be learned that you can be learning. So it's just a sort of a freedom of movement with those two props.
Many people refer to the sound of fire spinning, and if you've ever heard it up close, it almost sounds like the crashing of ocean waves. What does the sound of fire stir within you?
When I light up my equipment, you do definitely hear the sound of it moving when you're using it. I think for me, what it means is it's sort of like everything falls away when that flame is lit. You're aware of everything, but you're really, really focused in on what you're doing. And I think that it's almost like a moving meditation, even when you're performing. It's you can't ignore the flame, that's for certain. You have to be aware of where it is and what it's doing.
Can you talk about the history of the art form and how that influences the practice today?
Sure. I think fire performance encompasses many, many different props. From probably, they each have a different history. And so to try to go through the history of all of them would be a little challenging, I think. So I can speak to probably mostly poi and a little bit of fire staff. Is a lot of the history of these props come from cultures that use them for practicing dexterity for the art of war, really using combat tools, if you will. And I think over time, that's been sort of turned into an art form in itself. And so with poi, that really originated, it's thought to have really originated with the Maori people in New Zealand. And that is still a group that practices it and shares that cultural aspect today. And then I think, you know, a lot of the other martial art type things like fire staff, it's really kind of probably comes from a little bit of like Asia and all the martial arts, but also the Pacific Islander culture, where layers like the fire knife dance. And I think over time, it's probably just been absorbed by so many different people who have then combined it with other art forms and dances. And so today, I think what we see today is very different from what it probably originally started out as. And I think people have really pushed the art form over time and combined it with all kinds of things. I think specifically speaking about poi, you'll really see today a lot of combination with juggling, with contact juggling, or juggling 3 poi or juggling 4 poi. So that's one way that it's definitely changed. I think it's also over time it's become more popular. More people are aware of it because of the internet. And I think that that has really helped spread the development of new techniques and skills and styles across all the different types of props out there.
You've been fire dancing for well over 10 years now. Have you seen fire performance change in that time that you've been an active performer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot of it's kind of the sense of it's gone from being, I think, a little less technical to being more and more specialized, each type of prop. That doesn't mean that you can't be a part of it or do it if you don't have like deep technical skills in a specific prop. But I think it's just evolved as the art has evolved, and it is still as exciting as it is probably when it was first, these props were first lit on fire, whenever that may have been.
Let's talk a little bit about your teaching at the Crucible, which you often talk about as a really special part of what you do. And just to, of course, highlight, this is Teacher Appreciation Week, so we are very appreciative of you, one of our favorite teachers at the Crucible. And we thank all the teachers listening, of course. What do you like teaching about fire performance?
I think what I really, really love is meeting all the new students and meeting them. They all come from different walks of life. So of course there's that social aspect. I also really love trying to take something that I know that somebody else would like to learn and to try to figure out how to transfer that knowledge to them as quickly and successfully as I can, so that they feel successful in what they're doing and that they feel like they're advancing and moving forward and able to not just technically use a prop, but to start expressing their own style when they use that prop. And so those are some of the things that I really love. I love the students.
We do have some of the best students around, just like we have some of the best teachers around, if I do say so myself. What is your approach to teaching fire performance to new students? It's often thought of as one of our kind of scarier or least familiar art forms at the Crucible. How do you start that conversation, or how do you start that practice with newbies?
Well, first we kind of go through how to make a set of practice poi, excuse me, which I'm going to demo using our, excuse me, using our, the soft poi that we make in class, so that you can see what that looks like. And so it's a gradual progression. You're not like, here, let me put these props in your hand on fire, go, good luck. That would just be irresponsible and not a pleasant experience for anybody. So the approach that I take is that it's all an experiment, that it's about having fun and trying something new. And that it's interesting, a lot of students come into class really with a lot of high expectations for themselves. And I feel like it's sometimes my job to reset their expectations so that they feel a little bit more free to like move at their own speed, not necessarily that they have to keep up with the pace of the class, or if they are moving ahead, I can give them extra things to practice and try. But it's all about experimentation and having fun.
Why do you think students are drawn to fire performance in the first place, and what keeps them engaged?
I think there's a certain risk-taking quality about people who like to sign up for fire dancing classes, because it's something that's inherently dangerous to play with fire. But I think they're also the kind of people who understand that if they prepare, it's a calculated risk, and it's something that to wield fire in an artistic way is really appealing. So I think a lot of them see it done somewhere, whether it's online or at a festival, and they go, wow, that looks neat, I want to try it too. But I think there's a certain interest in risk, a little bit of risk that students come to class with.
For someone who is nervous about trying fire performance for the first time, whether it's eating fire, spinning poi, staff, or hula hoop, why should they? Why should they not be afraid of it?
First of all, they don't ever have to ultimately use fire. You can always do all of these props, use all of these props and dance with them and express yourself with them without ever lighting them on fire. And there are some beautiful, beautiful LED light up props available. The other thing is that, kind of like I mentioned, of learning gradually. It's a matter of learning gradually so that you feel comfortable and ready to try lighting it on fire. Yeah.
Well, speaking of fire and performance, we want to talk a little bit more about your performance background and your performance history. Some of our guests, you might have seen the video that we played a little bit earlier as you were entering our virtual artist talk. We're going to show a quick clip of Lara performing again now. Thank you, Natasha, who's going to show that clip. This is a tango that you did with a partner. Well, I mean, it's hard enough to think about spinning poi on one's own, let alone with another person. So we're going to dive a little bit into your performance background and how you create some of those incredible fire performances. How do you approach designing your performances? Is it different when it's just you versus when you're working in a group or in a pair?
Yeah, there are certain aspects that are the same and certain ones that are different. When it's a solo thing, when I'm working alone, you have full creativity over what you make, and it's what your skill set can offer and bear. I hear a little feedback. And it's also when you're working with a group, there are many often creative opinions to take into consideration, but I actually really love working with other artists. I probably prefer it because you get to create something bigger, a bigger picture. I think that you also get so many more ideas than what you alone can come up with for how to create that that picture and that feeling that you're all trying to convey. And it's also so much more fun, personally, I think, to experience that performance and giving that performance and being done with it and knowing we all created this together and we got to experience it together. So it depends on your preferences and your style.
What's the first thing you do starting that process? Where do you start? Do you start with the movements, with a theme? How do you like to begin?
So I myself, let's see, I like to, usually I'm listening to music. The music is very, very much, for me, it can't be pulled apart. It can't be done as a separate thing. I have worked with people who create the prop work first and the movement around the floor, the blocking and things like that. And then they find a piece of music and overlay it. But I find it very hard to create without the emotive soundtrack behind it. And I think, so that's where I start. And then from there, I listen to whatever piece of music I've selected like 100 times until you know all the little sounds and, beats and all the little intricacies of it. And usually as you're doing this, or I'm doing this, my mind is filling in, like this would go here, or this would be sort of how I would want to express this feeling in the music here, a certain move or sequence. And it all starts to fill in together, and then you start kind of piecing it together physically. I do also have my own little form of notation so that if I, come back to creating something later, I haven't forgotten things. Of course, with phones and cameras on phones now, it's much easier to just record something. But sometimes you're, in the moment, and it's easy just to write it down rather than to video yourself. But that's kind of how the process that I go through. And then it's practicing until you don't have to think about it, until you're really able to like connect with the audience and convey the thing that you've created, the feeling and the spectacle of it, I guess.
Much of what we do at the Crucible is creating art pieces in a physical sense, things that people can take home or give as gifts. And fire and performance is different. It is an experience that has a literal burnout time. How does it feel to create performance art in an otherwise very tangible world?
I think there is something really wonderful about having an object, a piece of art that you can touch and feel and see anytime you kind of wanted to pull that out and look at it. I think that's actually one of the most appealing things about fire performance or performance art is that even if you create a piece that you do multiple times, it's really each time its own new moment. And so it's always a little bit different from the time before, whether it's the audience or that's there, the feeling of the people in the room or the setting or your inner, your inner well-being at the time when you're doing this. So I do love sort of the immediacy of it, and that it's something hopefully a feeling and an image that people can then take with them in their memory.
Sometimes that's even better than an object.
Yeah, to touch back on that feeling.
Yeah. Earlier in our talk and just now we shared a clip of you in a duo piece, a tango, if you will. Can you speak to that piece and what it was like to incorporate tango and poi?
Sure. That was a piece that a Vulcan Crew fire troop friend of mine, we decided to make a piece. And as we were bouncing around ideas, Jordan is his name, he said, how about a tango? And I thought, okay. But we didn't know anything about tango. So it was kind of like to make up a piece about tango we felt like we needed to learn a little bit about it. So we actually did take a couple of lessons. I think our poi skills are probably a little bit better than our tango skills in that piece, but we do honor the tango with some actual footwork and things of that nature. And it's not easy to take two forms of sort of dance and combine them when the footwork for the tango and the movement is very different from like waving your hands around in geometric patterns on top. So it was a little bit of a challenge, and we, I think, honored it, not necessarily made it a full-fledged tango. So it was great working together. It took a while, but we kind of could riff off each other and kind of piece it together. And we decided that we wanted to make it a little bit of a story. So it's a little bit of a story about two people who meet, and kind of the life cycle of a relationship. And yeah, which a lot of tango is about, people, you know, dancing together.
It seems like a perfect match, right? The fire of poi and the fiery passion of tango, they go perfectly hand in hand. Could you feel the connection between the two art forms as you were building the piece and as you were performing?
Yes. I mean, we had rudimentary tango skills, but we did continue to try to like practice and figure out how can we incorporate some useful, like meaningful footwork in there. And so, yes, it kind of made me want to continue to learn Argentine tango. And so that's another thing that came out of it, was an appreciation for another art form, another type of dance.
You've also organized and participated in fire dancing festivals, even serving as a director of the Fire Drums Festival at one point. Can you tell us about those experiences and how they impact the art form?
Yeah, I think that fire dancing festivals they used to be far and few in between. There was sort of in the United States, that is, there was a sort of an East Coast and a West Coast. And then Burning Man was a place where people saw a lot of fire dance happen. And those festivals have grown in number as fire dancing has grown in popularity. And now there are many across the US and even around the world. And so what's nice is you get people mixing from different parts of the country or different parts of the world, and you get to sort of learn new techniques that they're coming up with. And it's really an opportunity to share skills, and then also be inspired by other people doing things that makes you want to continue to learn and grow in what you're doing and the prop that you're using.
There is a perception of fire performance being overly sexualized entertainment. What are your thoughts around this art form being interpreted in this way?
I do see what you're referring to, sort of the sense of women in a lot of skimpy clothes, men too, in skimpy clothing. And sort of, I think there's this instinct that fire and dance have to go together in this mysterious sort of way. But really, there's so many different ways to convey. I mean, fire is a tool to convey all kinds of things. And so I will mention that it's actually safer to wear, I think, a little less clothing. You wouldn't want to cover up in full. I mean, this is part of the safety aspect of using fire. You are more likely to catch a piece of your clothing on fire than you are your skin. You might scorch your skin, but you're not likely to have it ignite, whereas your clothing might. So the less surface area for that, there's a benefit to that, and that can encourage sort of the sexy costumes that you see people wear. That said, I also wouldn't shame anybody for ever wanting to bring a sexy aspect about it, because that is their form of expression, and that's how they're expressing themselves. And I don't have a problem with that. I also think that, you know, all forms of dance, I mean, it's really a celebration of the body, of the human body. So, yeah.
Has something ever gone wrong or almost gone wrong? Can you tell us about the skills you've used to recover in an otherwise potentially unfortunate situation?
Sure. Fortunately, I haven't had too many things go wrong, but they do go wrong from time to time. There was a wedding, beautiful, beautiful wedding along a river in Northern California on this big sloping lawn, big white wedding tent, and we were outside of it. The guests were very beautiful, dressed up, and I was performing with the troupe, and one of our troupe members, it was his responsibility to dip all of our equipment in advance and then spin it off, meaning to get rid of excess fuel so that when you light it up and start spinning it around, it doesn't fling flaming fuel all around. And I don't know whether he accidentally forgot that or was distracted, I'm not sure, but when it came time for us to all pick up our props and go, because we were flowing from one piece to the next, I kind of realized these are really wet, as you know, these are really wet, I can feel fuel. And all of a sudden, you know, we're performing for these guests, and I felt like something hot on my behind. And I looked over at our fire safety and I was like, hey, can you check this out? And he was just so happy to be watching all of us perform. I'm like, hey. And I finally realized, ow, this is getting hot. And so I came over to him and had him put me out with a wet towel. I think I also kind of patted out my behind because you just need to cut the oxygen from that fuel. From that fire. So yeah, I set my behind on fire at a wedding.
Nothing like a little flaming tushy just to bring up the spirits of people, you know.
Oh, memorable, right?
Memorable, right. Well, I'm glad that you're okay and you had obviously practiced and knew exactly how to make sure that you stayed safe in that situation. I want to remind our viewers that if you have questions for Lara, you can go ahead and add them into the chat box and I'll read them out loud in a little bit. We've got a couple more questions for Lara that I'm going to ask before we transition to a little demo that Lara is very, very graciously going to do for us today. We want to transition and talk a little bit about this time that we're all in, this shelter-in-place time, and talk about how art is helping you cope or how it isn't. Now that we are in week 8 of the shelter-in-place, could you tell us about your creative process? How has creating in quarantine been for you?
I will be really honest and tell you that it's been challenging. I have not been so inspired to pick up my props and use them. Most of what I have been doing is kind of what I described, where I'm listening to music and visualizing. And so I think there will come a point at which, you know, I can visualize and then will want to create. That said, you know, you can't lay your prop aside forever. So it's a good way usually once you start doing something, you want to keep doing it. And so it's a good thing to just even pick it up a little bit, you know, here and there. And I've been getting a little bit better about that.
Might you have any suggestions for artists out there who are feeling stuck or distracted in their practice too?
Yeah, so some of the things that actually have worked for me is if I don't feel like that particular avenue of creativity, some of the other things I've done are like coloring and coloring books with pencils and and sort of letting myself experience that sort of, it's not a thinking process, it's an experiential process to color. And then I think there's another way. I was given some materials to make felted wool, like little animals and creatures. So learning, I don't know anything about it, so learning the techniques and practicing that and seeing, just experimenting with that, kind of just doing anything to keep yourself like trying something new and creative. Another thing, and I've participated in writing groups before, and the thought is, you know, you're supposed to just show up every day, just write one page every day. And I think that is really good advice when you really don't feel like you can, is just to try just a few minutes of whatever it is that you love. My husband told me a funny story about one of his hometown friends posting something recently on social media about how he used to be a really good violin player and had put it away for everybody, or he had put it away for a long, long time. And during this time of the pandemic and sheltering in place, he wanted to pull that back out and play it again, and no longer had the muscle memory. And so he was describing there's nothing more frustrating than being good at something once, setting it aside, trying to pick it up again, and finding out you have to relearn it all over. So I think that was like a good wake up moment, like, hey, keep doing it. Just keep trying even a little bit every day.
What has been a surprising discovery during this time of shelter in place for you?
It's not really art related. It's that I don't know where all our laundry comes from, because we're hardly doing any laundry right now, and it's wonderful. I love it. It's so freeing. I love not having that chore or having it just be like 1 or 2 loads. That's one thing. And then I'd say another thing that's sort of been not so much a surprise, but a real delight during this time is one, I've seen a lot of neighbors come forward and do things for each other that, and really kind of come out of their shells and get to know each other. And then another would be that we adopted a cat in February, and she's a sweetheart, Lucy. But we've had this incredibly wonderful amount of time to bond with her that you wouldn't normally have. I'd be distracted in doing other things. And so every day she reveals a little more of her personality, and we're here to see it and like be present for it. So those are some of the things that are nice surprises.
I'm totally jealous about the laundry thing because I'm having the complete opposite experience. I feel like I need to do laundry every day. I'm not even wearing any real clothes anymore, and I do laundry all the time. So please share with me your secrets later. I am so excited now. Lara is going to do a demo for us, which is such a treat, and we are so grateful. So Lara is going to start making her way outdoors because, of course, we're not going to have any lighting up fire inside. No. And I know he doesn't want to be on camera, but I just want to give a special shout out to Lara's husband, who is acting as fire safety for her today. So Lara's going to make her way outdoors. While she is doing that and getting herself safely set up, I just want to give a reminder, if you've got some questions that you would like me to read out to Lara, please go ahead and add those into the chat box, and I will read them out loud. And of course, just to give a couple shout outs to some of the people who've helped to make our virtual artist talk happen today. A big thank you to Natasha Von Cannell and Kathy Nyland, our incredible marketing duo, who helped to make all of this possible and helped to message out all the incredible work of the Crucible. All right, it looks like Lara is getting set. She has made her way outside. Lara, you let us know when you're ready, and we'll throw that spotlight back over to you.
So what I'm going to do is actually do a quick little bit of poi with the sock poi that we use in class. And then I'm going to attempt a little bit of fire eating. It's a little breezy today, so we'll see how this goes, okay? And I am ready.
Wow, thank you so much, Lara. That was incredible. I had to jump on my phone. My computer got a little funky. I can still see the chat. So if you have asked audience questions, I'm going to read them off of my phone. Thanks for your understanding, fabulous audience and fabulous Lara. That was incredible. Hopefully not too hot for you.
It was a little toasty. It's about 95 out there. All right.
If I am able to ask some of your audience questions, go ahead and add those into the chat box. Our first question is from someone that we know very well. It's from our adult programs manager, Melissa Gray. Melissa has asked, what does fire eating taste like?
That's a great question. So if you've ever had maybe a hamburger that somebody's used too much lighter fluid on, and you're eating it and you're like, I can kind of taste the lighter fluid. That's a little bit what it tastes like. It's similar, but that's not to say that it tastes bad.
We've got another audience question. I feel like some of the most memorable fire performances I've seen have been a lot about place and the connection between the performer, the art form, and the physical context of the performance. Do you have a most memorable or meaningful physical setting in which you've performed?
That's a great question too. I love these questions. Yes, there was, again, it was a wedding and it was up somewhere in Northern California. I was not the driver. It was so far up in the Northern California hills, and everybody, it looked out where we performed. It was at up against a vineyard, and it looked out across a dance floor and an entire valley. And I was performing with my best, most favorite people to create with, very good friends. And the wedding, we had pieces that were all related to relationships and sort of couples and love and things like that. And so it all just went together really well. The wedding guests were surprised. It was a surprise for them. And so they were really delighted. We were delighted that they were delighted. And really, in the end, we ended up, a lot of the time you end up sort of leaving or being in the background, and they welcomed us in and mixed and mingled and invited us to the wedding. So it was just a really magical sort of moment.
That's so special. Everything that you bring to an event like that becomes part of the fabric of their memories as well. We have another audience question. What can I weight the poi socks with? What is in those long poi socks to help keep the physical motion happening?
I left them outside, or I'd open them up and show you. They, what we use in class is lentils. So you're trying to make essentially like a little bean bag. You'll see other people use tennis balls. You could use, I've seen people use little stuffed animals. I mean, you could get really creative and customize your own set of poi, but to weight them, we usually use about 1/2 cup of lentils in the toe of each sock. And sometimes we use a little inner sock to hold those lentils tight, like a little bean bag. And you could use rice or anything kind of like that sand. You might not need as much sand, but you know, you can play with the weight.
I think I'd be worried about giving myself a black eye.
I've done that with a hula hoop.
Okay, so hula hoops potentially more dangerous than the poi then.
I think it's just, no, I think it's just what you take to.
That's true. Another question from an audience member. Do you have favorite artists or songs that you dance to for your fire performance? what musically inspires you?
I have a real love of all kinds of music. I really kind of attribute that to my family. My dad he was always playing the guitar and singing, and my brother's a musician, and my mom, we were always singing in the car. So it's hard to say there's one type of music. It really depends on what I feel like I want to create. But I have a tendency to like, right now I'm on a Sophie Tucker kick, Sofitukker. They have a lot of, they layer a lot of their music. So you can do a lot with it, in that you might do something with a real slow rhythm, but then you can also, they'll have like something, another instrument playing underneath at a faster pace. They'll have a lot of interesting like vocalizations and sounds. And I'm not sure, I guess I'm not sure how I would characterize them, but they'd be sort of like electronic-ish music. But it really depends. It really depends. For example, the Fire Tango piece, we had a friend make that music for us, and he created it. So we didn't know what it was going to sound like. We were like, well, this is kind of what we're going for, the feeling and the story. And he created that for us, which was really nice. So it varies a lot. But I would say right now, I just can't stop listening to Sophie Tucker and using, like, spinning to them.
I'll definitely have to check Sophie Tucker out. Another audience question. Once someone is ready for fire poi, do you have suggestions on where you can practice, assuming someone lives in a residential area without access to a place like the Crucible?
Okay. Usually you want that to be on your own property, where you have the ability, you know, it's yours. You can decide what you want to do with that. It depends on where you are. You might look for places where there are community spin jams, like where people do come together and are okay using fire. For example, there is at Lake Merritt, there's a kind of an open area where a lot of people gather on Friday nights, not during this time, but you know, when it's okay and safe. And that's sort of a place that people go and practice. I think if you're beach or lakeside somewhere that allows, might also allow you to do something like that. But it's always a good idea to check with whoever is the steward of that property.
Well, that's great. We are so grateful again to have Lara Hopwood join us for our virtual artist talk today. Seeing as there aren't any other audience questions, I want to give a huge thank you to Lara, who was our special guest this afternoon. We are so glad that you've decided to join us and be our featured guest and get to share all the incredible work that you've done at the Crucible, and be able to tell stories about what it's like to have the wield that power of the fire poi and fire hoop and fire eating. Just seems incredible. As we start to say thank you and wrap up our talk this afternoon with Lara, I want to remind everyone that today is our last day of our matching campaign at the Crucible. If you are able to help support us in making the arts accessible to all, we hope that you'll check out thecrucible.org and donate what you can. Follow us on social media, become a member, and help spread the word about the Crucible. You can check out more of Lara's work at enlightenedfire.com. Definitely check her out. And if you would like to learn more from Lara, you can take a class at the Crucible with Lara Hopwood and learn how to spin poi, eat fire, and do all sorts of amazing things that Lara has been able to do. Thank you to Natasha for adding some of those links into the chat. If you would like to follow Lara or learn more about fire and performance at the Crucible, you can grab those links from the chat box. A big thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We're so grateful that you've spent a little bit of your Friday afternoon with the Crucible, hearing about Lara's experience and learning a little bit more about the Crucible. We're going to start saying our goodbyes. So Lara, if you would like to say a quick goodbye, I'd love to invite you to do that.
I really appreciate being invited to do this. It certainly shakes up my days and makes this time more interesting. It's a great way. I've appreciated being able to stay connected to the Crucible and to all the people who care about the Crucible and who love art. And so thank you. I appreciate those who came and took time to listen in.
We couldn't have said it better ourselves. Thank you, Lara, and thank you all who've joined us.